Hello, this is Karen Harrison. Welcome to March Reiki Call. My website is karenharrison.net, and you can find this recording on my YouTube channel, on my website, and other places where you get your um, podcasts. So I'm excited tonight to have as my guest Jay Jackson. He is coming to us from the Andes Mountains in Ecuador, and he is a crystal expert. He's a dear friend. He is one of our licensed teachers with the International Center for Reiki Training. He's also a nurse, and he grew up in the remote mountains, Blue Mountains of East Central Oregon. And as a child, he loved to play with stones and study them. And then later, his parents began a gem faceting business, cutting precious gemstones. And then by his late teens, he became a master gem faceter. Is that
Yep, you got it.
All right. I wanted to say that right. And he found that if he studied a crystal and listened, that the crystal would communicate with him, and together they would come up with a design that would become an incredible work of art. So he also studied crystal healing with Laurels Shantigaya in Sedona, Arizona, who's now passed on. And he furthered his studies with Vogel crystal healing. So Jay's going to be sharing with us about Reiki's relationship with crystals and answering our questions. So welcome, Jay.
Oh, thank you so much. So you
Yeah.
can tell I have great passion for Reiki and great passion for crystals. And the combination of the two have been a wonderful thing for me in my life.
Yeah. So you have a rich experience with crystals, and I know that you love them. You've got a beautiful quartz crystal over there behind you, or I believe that's quartz.
It's a smoky quartz,
Yeah.
big
Well,
smoky quartz.
it's gorgeous. So
I will say that actually it was crystals that brought me to Reiki. And
yeah.
so it was that influence that brought me to the Reiki energy because I was having these transformative experiences with crystals, and it wasn't in my mainstream upbringing for you know having these experiences. There wasn't a religious answer for it, so I knew there was something more out there than what I was experiencing, and so that piqued my interest in other metaphysical modalities. So that's why I say that the crystals really helped hold me in that space until I was able to find Reiki.
Wow. And I think I may have forgotten to mention that Jay is also a nurse and a massage therapist. So he's taken a deep dive into the healing arts. So crystals led you to Reiki. That's interesting. Then how did you find Reiki through crystals?
Well, like I said, it was I was studying crystal healing, so I knew about the influence of crystals when I was having these experiences with connecting with crystals and having them communicate with me vibrationally. I would find that there were crystals when I went to facet them that they would tell you they didn't want to be cut. They didn't want to be altered. And it didn't matter what you did, what kind of glue you used to put them on the dop stick, they would find a way of popping off.
Hmm.
Or, or you would just have all kinds of troubles during the cutting process with them. And like I said, that first experience when I was, because when a faceter is faceting a stone and they have a piece of rough crystal, they to be a good quote unquote good cutter, you have to be able to cut for maximum weight and excluding all the inclusions and bringing in the best color. So positioning the stone is really important. So I studied that piece of rough for a long time and had books upon books of different designs that I was studying. And on this particular stone, I can remember exactly where I was sitting at my parents' home. I came up with a design. I just knew this is going to be a perfect design for this stone. And then I had just as clear as can be this little message is, oh, that's wonderful. But what if you did this to the pavilion, which is the bottom portion of the stone? And I went, oh, and I realized that this was not me thinking it. This was a voice coming from the crystal, the energy from the crystal was telling me that. And so, yeah, we included it, and it was absolutely gorgeous. So I knew that there was energy within the crystals themselves, and they were communicating with us. They had their healing properties. I also experienced a time when my dad was a very intuitive faceter. And so later on, after I had moved away and I'd come home, I always loved looking at the projects that he was working on. And I can remember walking into his little room where he stored all of his faceting equipment and stones, and I got blasted with this negative energy, just blasted. And I look around and I see 6 or 8 gorgeous pieces of ametrine. So it's amethyst and citrine together. And they were not happy. They were angry. And so I stopped and paused and said, what? Because I had not experienced this kind of an emotion from a rock before. And so then I could see that they had been broken into pieces. And then the information I got was that they weren't happy because of the way they were mined. So that it was a very traumatic process of how they were taken from the earth. So whoever was mining them was not honoring Mother Earth when they were taking them up, taking them out. What was really interesting is that even though these were beautiful, beautiful specimens, my dad could never cut them. He could never facet them. He just could, for whatever reason, he didn't have the same connection to the stones that I did, but something in it, he was never able to cut them. He actually ended up putting most of them into a polisher and just polishing them
Mm.
into rounded stones. So I actually have a couple of pieces of them still. So after a long period of time, that anger calmed down, and they were much more pleasant to be around. But so that as I in the early 90s, I would say I was living in Utah at the time, and I saw a magazine article. Well, that was in the newspaper article for a Reiki class that was being taught, actually within walking distance of my house. And I had never heard anything about Reiki before. And I just knew that I had to study Reiki. But I wasn't in my authentic self at that particular time. I was not in a position and didn't have the strength to be able to tell my family, I'm not going to go to church today. I'm going to go take a Reiki class. I couldn't do that at the time, even though I desperately wanted to, and I could not um, have the expenditure for a class at that time, which probably wasn't all that much. But I started trying to find as much as I could about Reiki, saved that article. This was before internet was around. Later on, I did find a book on Reiki in the bookstore, and I promptly bought that. And the book told me nothing about Reiki. It was just this one woman's healing journey through Reiki, but it still piqued my interest. So it was always in the back of my mind. And I was able to find a lot of different books on crystal healing. And so I had a nice little collection of different crystals and the healing attributes of crystals. And then later on, then when I went to massage therapy school, um, then I was able to connect with a couple of people who were actually practicing Reiki. And that's where I first found my first Reiki master, who gave me the attunements for Reiki. She didn't teach me anything about Reiki. She just gave me the attunements. but it still worked. It was a beautiful experience. And I immediately started making the divine connection with crystals and Reiki and how they worked together. Because it's more than just taking a colorful piece object, a purple amethyst, and setting it into a personal space of your client. There's a lot more to it. It's not just the color, it's actually the energy within the crystal that is actually affecting the energy of our aura and our chakras and our own whole spiritual being. Um,
So Jay, that's good to know. You can't just take a handful of rocks and just lay them out around a person. There's more to it than that.
well, you can, and you might get a benefit from it. But if you study more intently, there's a much. What I've learned is that the crystals themselves have their own spiritual consciousness, and um, and so when you honor that spiritual consciousness, just like an animal Reiki, for those who have gone through an animal Reiki class, we learn to respect Mother Earth and we learn to respect the animals and their consciousness. This is respecting Mother Earth and the gemstones that she's created. We know crystals have a vibrational quality to them. It's the reason why we can communicate via Zoom today, is because a quartz crystal has a specific vibrational frequency that sets the time. And with the megahertz, we can transmit data all over the world. We have computers, we have crystal LEDs. It's basically crystal technology that we're using. We use crystals in our radios. We use crystals in our early watches because again, the vibrations were so specific. So I had started taking Reiki classes, then formal Reiki classes through Lisa Starana in Utah. And I just absolutely loved the curriculum and finally had someone who would teach me more about Reiki. And then I learned about Laurel. So Laurel Shantigaya, and when I first connected with her, she was still in Colorado. And then after that, she had moved to Sedona, Arizona. And I desperately wanted to take her crystal healing classes from her. And I was starting to become more authentic, but because I was being more authentic, financial situations were tough, um, but I still could make that as a priority. And so it was 15 years ago, actually 15 years ago, probably this week, that I journeyed from Utah to Sedona, Arizona. And I had the most magical experience. The months prior to that, I was faceting um, a piece that was not meant to be used as a jewelry piece of a normal gemstone. I was faceting a Vogel inspired crystal, so a crystal that was intended for healing purposes. And I spent a lot of time doing Reiki on that crystal while I was doing faceting it. I even saved the grindings of that crystal because there was so much energy being put into that. Um, and so then when I get to Sedona and start taking Laurel's classes, wow, I've realized that yes, her and I, our thought processes jived exactly. Everything was just exactly how as I had envisioned it. It was more about the energy of the crystals, the spirit of the crystals, and spirit of the brothers and sisters of the light who have stewardships of the crystals. Her and I both had connections with Lumerian times, and just some beautiful energies that came through that. And then that just helped me cement all those teachings and kind of combine everything together.
Wow. So, and that's the course that you are teaching now, right? You're teaching Laurel's curriculum, but you've
Teaching
added
Laurel's
some
curriculum,
home and
uh,
put your information.
right? So I've had the opportunity of teaching it in her classroom space. a couple of times since she was no longer able to. Um, and it isn't for everybody, but for those who do take it, it's a huge spiritual awakening in realms that people may not have thought even existed. I do say when I give Reiki sessions, I don't always include crystals in them. If I'm doing a crystal session, I do always include Reiki with them. I do a lot of meditations though with my crystals. So I use the crystals a lot for my own spiritual healing and divine connections.
So you're using
And
the
yeah,
crystals to connect with the divine combined with Reiki. And I thought this was
correct.
interesting. So you use Reiki with all your crystal sessions, and sometimes you use crystals with Reiki.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, Usually if I'm going to be using a crystal with a Reiki session, I'm Reiki will tell me, or the crystals will tell me, one of the two. So I don't just automatically include them unless the client specifically is asking for a crystal session, um, and then I'll do it. Um, but I do use crystal grids, and I have used them for many, many years. When I first started teaching, so here I was, brand new teacher, maybe taught one class, and then I moved communities. And so I was an hour away from anyone who might have known about me. And I was a little discouraged because I wanted to become part of the licensed teacher program. I wanted to go through that application process. And so the thought came to me, I can make crystal grids to put out there for students to be attracted to my Reiki classes. And so I came up with a list of um, like 10 people at that time who I thought might be interested. And so I took a quartz crystal and I put that in the center, taped it to the center of a 3x5 card. And then I took 10 other stones, usually carnelian, or some were fluorite, and I taped them around in an oval shape around that quartz crystal. And I actually put my friend's name on the back of that 3x5 card. And so I thought, well, if I know 10 people who might be interested, they might have 10 people that might be interested. And so then I had 10 cards with a total of 110 potential energetic beings ready for my ready for my class. So it put me in a better, if nothing else, it put me in a better mindset that I can attract people to my Reiki classes. And then, yes, some of them did actually come and participate in um, my Reiki classes, and they did bring people, friends and family members as well. Uh, so that just really helped me energetically and probably helped prepare people as well for that. So using distance healing um, and crystals is extremely powerful. So one of the important things to note is that, crystals themselves, the natural crystals, I believe, are quite intuitive. They have knowledge. They've been on this planet for, you know, millions of years. So they have recorded the vibrational qualities of everything that's gone on in the planet. So they are in and of themselves very wise. Um, and but they're also usually very pure energetic beings. We can program them with our own intentions with Reiki, and they will continue to vibrate out that information. And then that's how we can continue to send energy to healing needs throughout the world continuously, even if we're not there. So people who've taken a Usui master class, um, we teach our crystal grid class there in that class, and that to me is a very, very important aspect of using crystals. So I will use a crystal grid. I put intentions in there all the time. Um, and I think it does a lot of great things. Then I'll have specific grids for certain intentions, and then I have another one for helping other people.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the ways that people can learn about crystals? I mean, you talked about intuitively, where like you pick up a crystal and maybe you meditate with it and ask it, what it can teach you. Uh, but are there certain books that you like?
Um, there is the melody book on Crystal Bible
Mhm.
that I use, but
That
it
huge
only
book,
that
that
huge book.
big,
I,
intimidating book.
I love the book, but it's basically it's not talking about the spiritual nature of crystals. None of the books really talk about the spiritual nature of crystals. But it's a good reference book for all the esoteric capabilities of the crystal. Many of the crystals have long histories of being used in healing modalities throughout many generations of time. And so, for me, it's in using that intuitive process. Um, One of the interesting things, like I was talking with Colleen Benelli, and she talked about walking down the street and having this, like, probably a piece of gravel. It wasn't even anything beautiful. Stop her in the street and have her pick up this rock and had a message for her and communicated to her. So part of it is creating that ability to have discernment, being open channels to be able to hear messages. So a lot, we have spirit guides, but we have to, even though we all have spirit guides and guardian angels, we have to listen to them. They may be trying to communicate to us, but unless we listen, that's not going to do any good. It's the same thing working with crystals. We have to be a little bit more open. We had a question about what's my favorite crystals. I have three of my favorite crystals here. If you'd like to meet them, um, my favorite is a Lemurian quartz crystal. So, a Lemurian quartz crystal typically is found in Brazil. Um, and what makes it Lemurian is a giant crystal point here. Um, is the striations on the crystal. So if you can see that those little striations on the side, and it's actually a little bit better on this side, this face here. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, pull it back
So
just.
those are like it's like a record player. The vibrations on the old record player. Um, and so they just have pure, clear energy, and the vibrational quality of them are just absolutely incredible. It's really difficult to find a really good Lemurian crystal anymore because a lot of them have been mined out. Um, but those are my favorites, and these are crystals that I would not cut, would not facet. So now the thought of faceting like something like that would just turn my stomach
Mhm.
because it is a better purpose. The other one is like this is one that I personally work with. This is the amethyst. Um, I love working with the amethyst. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful healing. Maybe it's for me personally. I use this. This is my personal meditation piece. Oh, Lucy, look at that. And my other favorite is aquamarine. And so I have this aquamarine. This crystal is just really, really special to me and is really important to me in my meditative work. And it took me a long time to acquire it. So I had a beautiful person at Peace Place in Sedona, Arizona, while I was attending a Reiki class there. It said, "Hey, Jay, why don't you go hold this crystal while you're taking the class?" A little stinker, because they knew I would instantly connect with the crystal. And it took me 2 or 3 years to be able to actually afford it. So this was Lisa, who works at Peace Place. And so she put it aside. And it was a couple of years before I was able to purchase it and finally was able to purchase it. And I had a picture of it, so I would still meditate with it even before I was actually acquired it. For fascinating purposes, one of the most interesting stones as tourmalines, I love working with tourmalines. They're just so many beautiful colors, um, and they have a beautiful energetic presence. A fascinating stone that I work with and I like to use in healing is blue kyanite. Because blue kyanite has a really interesting um, physical property to it. So, each crystal has a different hardness. So, this crystal won't scratch the surface of this crystal because this crystal is harder, more durable. But this crystal would scratch quartz easily. So, with kyanite, we have multiple directions in the stone. So, you have an A axis, a B axis, and a C axis. In the kyanite, it's relatively soft in two of the axes. So if I took it on a grinder, it would just grind right away. But if I took it and put it on its C axis, all this sudden it becomes like steel. It is as hard as can be. So the hardness of the stone is different um, depending on the axis of the stone, which makes it really, for me, metaphysically, a very interesting stone to work with because it has that duality to it. It can be more than one thing at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, so then there was a question about selenite, using selenite. I don't use selenite to clear other crystals, which is a great question. Selenite is a great crystal to actually do a lot of cleansing work, clearing your space. And I do use selenite when I'm starting a session and clearing out the energies of a client. But when I'm clearing any crystal, I simply use Reiki. I don't bathe them. I don't put them in salt. I don't bury them. I just use Reiki. Reiki is so much more powerful. It clears out
Easy.
everything. Easy. It's easy, and it's not hard on the crystal. You could take a crystal that's absolutely beautiful and think you're going to clear it, and you put it in the sunshine, and all of a sudden the sunshine is going to fade the color to nothing. Or you may have a selenite and you put it in a liquid, and it may start to dissolve.
Yeah, that'd be
So,
bad to play with selenite and water.
yes, so I just say I just use Reiki. Um, but when I first get a crystal, I don't just, and we teach this in the class, in the introductory class, I call it the fundamentals crystal class. I don't just clear the crystal by sending Reiki to it when I first working with it. I develop a relationship with that crystal first. While I'm in that whole process, I'm going to clear it, but I'm also going to develop um, a relationship with the crystal. I'm going to go in and use the distance healing symbol, connect to the origin of that crystal, find out where it was birthed from Mother Earth, feel out the energies of where it was birthed, send healing to the mind area to try to heal Mother Earth's trauma from that crystal being removed. Um, and then I energetically connect with the crystal and try to find out what its personality is like, um, and see what information it has for me. Um, Sometimes I just make that divine connection. I don't get anything. I just know that it's happy and wants to work with me, and it'll let me know later that um, that it wants to work with me. So that's kind of how I clear and work with the crystals. So in the class, we go through a specific meditation that we will go through in actually making that divine connection um, with the crystal and its origin. And so we do that with each crystal that we're working with, so that we're developing that specific relationship. The only time I don't do it individually is usually something like um, oh, I'm sorry, my mind went like iron pyrite. So iron pyrite is in kind of a crystalline form, but as a grouping, or hematite, I will usually do them as a group. But anything that's in more crystalline form, I will actually do them, those stones, separately.
Hmm.
And
Now, might this be a good time? You had talked about possibly doing a little crystal meditation.
we can
Might
do a
this be
crystal,
an
but I'd love
appropriate?
to do. So the we're going to use my Lemurian quartz crystal. I'm going to try to hold it up here. I just have it up here. And so the idea is that when you connect energetically with this crystal, even through Zoom, even if you're not viewing this live, this is still going to work. And we're just going to do a meditation with this crystal. And we're going to try to ascertain or ask the universe, brothers and sisters of the light who have stewardship over the crystalline kingdom, what crystal should you work with in the future? So as we do that, I'm going to have you go ahead and just take a couple of deep breaths. Close your eyes. As a deep breath or two, and I want you to go ahead and imagine that you're walking through a beautiful garden, and this is a garden of all crystals and stones. You may have stones that are balancing stones, or people have used them as artistic art. And on this path that you're walking on is beautiful marble. So one of Mother's Earth's most beautiful creatures, marble. And as you're walking in along this path, you're finding yourself up higher and higher in the divine universe, in some of the highest kingdoms of the divine. And as you walk along, it starts to become a little bit foggy around you because of the elevation that you now climbed to. Off to the side, you notice a beautiful marble bench that you can sit on. So go ahead and just find yourself sitting on that bench, taking a couple of more deep breaths, and just feel and connect with the energies of this divine universe. And then realize that there may be members of the brothers and sisters of the light, angelic beings who have stewardship over the crystalline kingdoms, beings from Lemuria and ancient times. And one of them has a special message for you. And one of them steps forward and motions for you to open up your hands. So go ahead and open up your hands. And this beautiful being is going to place an object in your hands. And they pat your hand and step back. I want you to go ahead and just meditate on this object that's in your hand. Feel the energy pulsing from it. Is the object communicating to you now what type of crystal it is? Or do you know intuitively? Turn it around in your hand if you want. Is it smooth? Is it rough? Is it heavy? or is it light? Now use your divine energy to make a divine connection with this crystal. Feel the vibration of the crystal. Feel the divine love that the vibrations that crystal has for you. When you connect energetically with the crystal, listen with your ears, listen with your soul and your spirit, and the vibrations of the crystal, of the message it may have for you. Is it warm in your hands? Is it cold? What message does it have for you? You know that you have a divine connection with this etheric crystal and the divine kingdoms. And after you receive your message, you can give the crystal back to the light being that brought it to you, or you may simply set it down the ground, leaving it in that divine kingdom. So you always have an energetic connection to that divine kingdom. Now offer thanks and gratitude for the beings that have attended us. Offer gratitude for Mother Earth and for the beauties that she has presented us, for all the crystalline kingdoms, and for the beautiful planet that she has created for us. And we honor and respect Mother Earth. You can say goodbye and follow your way back down the path. And when you come down the path, you're now passed out of the fog, back in this time and place. Take a couple of deep breaths in and out. And then come back to your full awareness of this time and place. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes.
Wow, Jay, thank you so much. That was beautiful. And
And I love, go ahead.
I realize I totally failed to mention that I am sponsoring Jay to come and teach his Reiki fundamentals crystal healing course. I didn't even get the name of it right. Uh, at my home and online from my home, April 27th and 28th. It's a Saturday and Sunday. And the price of the class in person includes about $250 of crystals. And if you take the class online, it's cheaper and you provide your own crystals. So you can get that
So,
information on my website, and that will direct you to Jay's website where you can sign up if you're interested.
so I'm excited about being in Karen's beautiful healing space and teaching this class. It's just fascinating that how many people who have these divine connections and sometimes are afraid to say something about it. Um, I am interested to hear if anyone received it that was on that's here live. What kind of messages they received, if any. So if you want to just put that in the chat, or if maybe you fell asleep, that's okay too. So I also believe there are probably crystals in the universe that we don't even have any knowledge about. So you never know what up there in those heavens might have actually um, have given you.
There's so many fascinating stones. I just went to the Gem and Mineral Show last weekend or the weekend before, and got a lot of new crystals and things, and got a new stone called Afghanite, which is a fluorescent crystal. I guess it shines under black light. Um, So if anyone has any questions, you're also welcome to either ask that or put your question in the chat. Oh yeah, Laura
So Laura,
says, I was given a carnelian for grounding and connection to the earth.
oh, love carnelian. I use it a lot. We use it in the class. Um, but Karen, you brought up an interesting um, thing about the stone that you received that reacts to black light.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I had always read about the history of the Hope Diamond. The Hope, this beautiful sapphire blue diamond, and it was actually at one point considered, first because so many people who had it had financial failings and everything. And so I had the opportunity several years ago to go to the Smithsonian, to the Natural History Museum, and on a tour go see the Hope Diamond. And I was interested about what was I going to see energetically. Um, what was I going to feel that evil part of it? Everyone was claiming to feel, or what would it be? Well, come to find out, the Hope Diamond also fluoresces red under a black light, and they have no explanation as to why.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way they could ever even hope to find out, it would destroy the stone.
Mm-hmm.
And there were beautiful stones, all kinds of different diamonds, crystals of all kinds in that display. It was absolutely overwhelming. It's absolutely beautiful. The Hope Diamond is in its own special place, and I connected with it, and there was no evil or anything sinister about that crystal whatsoever. And in fact, I found out that during World War I, the lady who owned it at that time, she would go and to the hospitals, to the military hospitals, and visit soldiers to try to get their hopes and make them feel better. And she would take that Hope Diamond off and just pass it around, and they would just pass it around from bed to bed and let people observe it. So it was just really interesting that with that experience. So I loved finding out about the history of that stone and exactly where it was at, because it had been afraid at times because of people were trying to steal it, and it felt safe and secure um, where it was at.
Mm-hmm. So someone is asking, what crystals do you like to use in your Reiki sessions?
I, Usually the crystals are going to tell me um, just basics. I always use a quartz crystals is my basic. Selenite I use usually prior or just the beginning of the session. Hematite is another stone that I use for grounding. Sometimes, even if I'm not doing a crystal session and we've done an intense work in Reiki, I will place some larger um, hematite crystals in the palms of my client's hand to try to help them ground. Um, I like fluorite crystals as well from a lot of emotional balancing, healing and balancing. Where other ones? So amethyst is one, and a lot of the quartz family, amethyst and citrine that I like, carnelian, moonstone, and different sunstone. I like so part of my history with sunstone was interesting. Sunstone is what got my family interested in faceting gemstones. So we had a family in a community about 2 hours away from us that they had learned how to cut facet gemstones, and they had a mine for these beautiful sunstones, and they had beautiful colors of sunstone with this yellow. Usually it was yellow that you were seeing in what they call a plush sunstone, but they were having these beautiful oranges and reds and even greens, and then copper schiller. So that literally layers upon layers upon layers of just flat copper pieces and going in the stone. And so I have an affinity for that. For another stone that we don't talk about very often, it's kind of in crystalline form, is called a starlight. So it's a very dark stone. Starlight's a very, very energetically very powerful stone. And I I have a couple that I who was it that was from New Mexico? So when I was in Espanola, New Mexico, um, in some of the Indian pueblos out there had starlight, and I was able to get a beautiful one, several pieces, but this one particular piece has a beautiful garnet, red garnet in the surface of it, and so yeah, so that's another favorite one of mine.
Yeah.
But basics, it's quartz crystals, and then whatever else is called. So usually what I'll do, if I had an in-person client, I would just have I have a couple of cases of just different crystals, and I will just open up my intuition and knowing what the situation is energetically, knowing what the situation is going with my client, and I'll just see what's calling me and what way it go. So prior to moving here, I had started collecting some palm stones. So they weren't so much crystalline form; they were more polished stones, but they were larger that fit in the palm, and I really liked them as well. And so I would integrate palm stones, so it's a little bit larger, polished stones, like a carnelian could be a palm stone. Um, so there are lots of different types that you could use.
So Jay, they're asking about, well, we already talked a little bit about books, but somebody wanted to know a little bit more about, how crystals were formed, but someone else was asking, how do you know where to purchase crystals from? Uh,
See, that's an age-old question because um, so a couple of different things. So if I'm looking for crystals, a lot of times I know some people go to Etsy. I don't typically go to Etsy for myself. I do favor going on eBay. Um, I am very hesitant to purchase anything coming from China. I have in the past I have purchased some items from China and come to find out they weren't as authentic as the what they were leading on to be. In their mind, they were authentic, but in reality, no, they weren't real.
mhm.
Um, Also, I try to take into account too, are they being mined responsibly? So I will kind of consider that. But eBay is one of my bigger go-to. But I also have specific vendors that I trust more than others for certain crystals. But for instance, on that first drive down to Sedona, Arizona. So I'm driving down through southern Utah. So if anyone has ever gone down through southern Utah, you're going through Bryce's National Monument and Zion's National Monument. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Well, along this Highway 89, there was a little town called Orderville, and with some crystal shops. And some of them, there's one shop had a lot of sodalite, and the sodalite was kind of mined in that area. But they had a lot of wonderful crystals. And I just took a peek and looked in the store and saw some beautiful, wonderful things. They weren't as cleaned up and polished as a nice crystal store, but then I go to Sedona and then I have price shock. So I realized I mean, so Sedona has beautiful crystals and you can find all gorgeous, gorgeous crystals there. Uh, they come with a cost. So I saved my money and then I went back up Highway 89 and stopped at that store and I was able to buy a beautiful amethyst geode, for like $150. That would have been $500 in Sedona. Of course, this was 15 years ago. I've got an orange selenite. It's actually above me. I don't touch it because it's extremely fragile. And so I was able to pick up some wonderful things. So some of these little off the road rock stores have some beautiful, beautiful things. And you can actually get them relatively inexpensive compared to your bigger stores or your like a Sedona place, tourist trap areas.
Yeah. Let me just mention here, one of our listeners has a store called enlightenedkc.store. So
Okay.
that sounds good. And we also, in Kansas City, we have a gem and mineral show twice a year. It's in March and November. So that would be a good place to go. There's a wholesale section and a retail section. And then also not that far from Kansas City, only about 7 hours, you can go down to Hot Springs, Arkansas, and you can mine your own crystals, or you can purchase them there in Jesseville or Mount Ida. I like Ron Coleman's Crystal Mine and also Wegner Crystal Mine in Mount Ida. Wegner is not W-A-G, it's W-E-G-N-E-R, Wegner Crystal Mine. So those are both good places and lots of other places. We just have a few more minutes. So
Well, there was a really good question about is there a way to tell or test if you've purchased a stone that isn't authentic? Um, Use your intuition is the biggest thing. Um, I like a stone that, for instance, this stone, you can see it's not cut. It comes out naturally. It's not been sawed. It's not been, you know, nothing's been altered to it. It came out of earth this way. And you can tell because it's not perfectly cut and shiny. There are a lot of crystals that are being sold that are being altered. So the crystal themselves are a genuine crystal. So they'll get genuine crystal points, and then they will do like a what they call aqua aura coating on it. So they'll put a coating on it, which makes it a very very beautiful color. Um, you just have to determine for yourself if that's what you want or not. I like the more authentic, um, but there are some of those that are absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. And so, and what's really interesting, which brings up the point of authentic or not, is in one of the intermediate class, we had Laurel would give us as part of our crystal kit an opalite. And an opalite is just a glass man-made worry stone. And I don't feel particularly drawn to it. Laurel loved it. So that just comes from your perspective. Um, so the one thing I would notice is that when I'm looking at a stone, I purchased a very large, tall crystal pyramid, and I could tell that I could see the bubbles in it, which to me indicated that it was probably quartz, but it was man created, melted, smelted quartz because of the bubbling that was in it. It was still a beautiful piece. It still could resonate with energy, but it lacked a lot of the energetic cohesiveness of the ancient energies that a crystal that hasn't been altered had. So that's kind of my answer.
Hey, Jay, you just accidentally switched off your
Oh,
video.
wow.
Okay. Well, there's so many fascinating things to talk about crystals. I imagine we could probably go all night. Now, some other opportunities to learn about crystals is Reiki Studio Facebook group. And it's a group run by Kathy Milanowski, Karen Kag, and Jay. I think you're also in it, and you're doing a weekly crystal talk and meditation there, right?
I've got a weekly little call. It's usually about 20 minutes to a half an hour Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, just called Crystal Illuminations. It's pretty basic. And we will tomorrow I'll be featuring this one, the aquamarine, and talking about this. So I just take one type of crystal each week and just talk about some of its unique properties and how we might use it. And we'll do a short little meditation with it.
Now, is that just on Reiki Studio or is that also in your own Facebook?
You can find it on my personal Facebook, Reiki Studio, and then I have Reiki Healing Arts is another page that I have it on.
All right. And your personal Facebook is under Jay Jackson.
J, middle initial V is in Victor. Jackson, you find me a little bit easier. I don't know what happened to my video.
Oh, I don't know. You were that. Okay. Well, little
I
internet.
lost you now.
No, we can still hear you. All
Okay.
right. So under JV is in Victor Jackson, Reiki Studio, and what was the other one? Illumin,
Um, Reiki Healing Arts.
Reiki Healing Arts. Okay. Yeah. Imperfections are good. Some will fill crystals with filler dye that do affect their properties and diminish them. Yeah, so many things to think about in crystals. Well, I appreciate your questions, and you've now got some resources on where to connect with Jay um, to get some more information. And you can go back and watch his past talks on individual crystals. You can also sign up for the class. The information on the class is on my website at karenharrison.net, which will link you to his website where you would actually sign up on his website. The Reiki Fundamentals Crystal class is April 27th to 28th, both online or in person. And Jay will also be teaching at Kathy Milanowski's studio in Deerfield, Wisconsin in May. And then he also has lots of other online classes. So if none of these dates work, there's another date that you could find to learn more about crystals. And let's see. And somebody had asked about books. You mentioned the book by Melody. What was the full name of that book again? Oh, what was it?
Love is in the earth. Love is in the earth.
Love is in the Earth. Okay. And were there any other books that you would recommend as we're closing out here?
That's the primary one that I use. I know there are a lot of others, um, uh, but it just depends on what you're looking for. I also have a lot of other mineralogy books that I will use as well. They don't really go into any metaphysical aspects, but they have some great information about the stones themselves, the chemical properties of the stones. So it's interesting that some of the like the stone maybe has magnesium in it. Because the stone has magnesium in it, it may be good for muscles, because that helps relax muscles. So there's a lot of different things. So let your intuition be your guide.
Yes. I picked up some lithium selenite at the Gem and Mineral Show and held it. It was like, oh my God, now I feel so relaxed. So I brought home a whole box of the stuff. So I thought maybe my students might like that. So, well, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Jay. I
Thank you, everybody.
appreciate you.
Yeah.
And thank you all to the listeners who are online and the ones that will listen later. I appreciate you and send you Reiki hugs and love. And we'll see you next month. I have a podcast that I'm going to be sharing about Reiki for sexual abuse. So, all right, catch that in April. All right, many blessings.
You.
Have a great night,
All right,
everybody.
good night.
Thank you.